There we are. We are officially broadcasting live to Facebook and to attendees. How amazing. Right, we'll just crack straight on because it's 2 o'clock. So hello everyone, and welcome to the first of hopefully many roundtables hosted by Viva la PD that will discuss all kinds of different things relating to the making of television in the UK. For this first one, we're going to keep it topical, and we're going to be discussing filming and the production process post-lockdown. We've got directors Anthony Pyke. Hello, Ant.
Hello.
Hello. Mike Parker.
Hello. Hello.
Hannah Blackwell.
Hello.
SP Zoe Hines.
Hi.
And PM Roxanne Donovan.
Hi.
Hello. So the idea is that this is a fairly relaxed chat that discusses different approaches or thoughts on things, rather than a lecture with any sort of definitive answers. And on that note, a caveat: the current situation is obviously constantly changing and evolving due to different steers from channels and government advice. So, quite frankly, no one really knows anything. But what we can do is talk about our own experiences so far, up to this point, and on the ground, in the office, and planning, and sort of go through those. Please feel free to use the Q&A and ask any questions that you've got. There's lots to get through those, so we'll just try and answer as many of those as we can as we go through. Anyway, without further ado, let's hear it. Mike, you've been out filming a fair bit, actually, over the past few weeks. So tell me what you've been up to and how was it?
Well, I spent the first 8 weeks lockdown not doing a lot. And then slowly, as the last couple of weeks have happened, some stuff has sort of filtered through, which is reassuring and exciting and good to engage the work brain. So I was doing a show called Wedding in Lockdown. So predominantly it's a show where the contributors are filming themselves. They couldn't get married, so they are going to get married virtually. And I think it's airing next week. So I was brought on to do some sort of talent-led stuff with a presenter. Because they kind of, the broadcaster had a big expectations for the show and wanted to up the production value and for it not just to be kind of filmed on video and sort of small video cameras and Zoom sort of stuff. So it was a learning curve for the production and a learning curve for me, I think, because it was the first sort of bit of filming they had done which it involved actually physically going out and shooting something. So I was self-shooting with a presenter. It was a fairly small team. We were filming in a big space in an office block, so we had big space, loads of rooms, so that wasn't an issue. I think the main thing, and I don't want to sort of talk too much about it, but I did 4 days, and every day got a lot better and more. I think the production got an idea of what was needed. I kind of got an idea of the working practice and how we sort of get around all the guidelines, etc. And I'm not going to lie, it was tough the first day. When you're back in the field after 8 weeks, you're all a bit rusty. I haven't self-shot for about a year, so you're just remembering kind of how tough and grueling self-shooting is. And then you're dealing with talent, and you're dealing with kind of not having any pre-production, because you're just coming in for the odd day here and there, and kind of picking up a script and sort of trying to deliver what the execs kind of have asked you to, and obviously you kind of, as we all do, want to do a good job. But initially, from looking at the schedule, I was quite worried that there was quite a lot to get, especially not really knowing and how long things would take because everything is a lot slower now, because you have to wipe down the kit before you touch it. You've got to wipe down radio mic. The presenter's got to put the radio mic on himself. You kind of got to brief him, and you're so used to being touchy-feely and being in people's space, and creating that kind of dynamic and relationship with a presenter you haven't worked with is hard from 2 meters.
Yeah, how was it? Like, what was the actual impact of on all those little bits? Because I imagine all that just adds so much more time to what already is can be a faffy process anyway. Yeah,
look, it's just we react spontaneously. It's like kind of second nature, the sort of things we do, and you do have to think before you act, because you're so used to just handing a presenter a radio mic, or putting a radio mic on a presenter, or just handing a bit of kit to someone to hold, or can you grab a battery and then grabbing it. You can't really do that. You have to think about, have I sanitized my hands before I pass that battery to my researcher, or have I sanitized this microphone before I give it to the presenter, and has the presenter put the radio mic on, and now I need to check it, or I need him to adjust it. And it's basically the second nature of what we do, and it's almost so instinctive. You have to sort of second guess yourself and just remind yourself that you're in this environment. And I think for me that was the biggest learning curve, because it's an unnatural process, basically. I mean, we're all in this weird unnatural environment anyway, washing our hands 20 times a day when we never used to anyway. So I think it's just taking a step and thinking about it. But saying that, that's hard when you've got time pressure and when you've got to deliver something. And I think the first shoot, we really got through it. But there was times, and I will be honest, I did feel uncomfortable at times, because when you're kind of rushing in and you sort of have to take a step back and trying to get the presenter to do something, or see what he's on his laptop, and the radio mic's not quite right, and sometimes maybe there was occasions where you might cross that line. But I think reading the guidelines is a big thing, and it's in section 6. It's called feedback loop, and I think more than anything on that document, I think that is the most important thing, because production don't really know. This is all new to us. We don't really know. So feeding back, I fed back to the execs in the production after that first shoot, and sort of stressed for kind of 3 points really. Was the schedule needs to be more realistic. We just need to manage expectations, and just everyone needs to kind of be on the same page and just kind of work together and think before they react. And I think after that happened, that on the next shoot I did, that completely happened. And there was more hand sanitizer, there was gloves, there was more time in the schedule. Not much more time, but there were just more buffer times to be able to do things a little bit slower, but still work efficiently, because we've still got to work efficiently, right? We don't want to be too slow, but it just, having that buffer in the back of your mind gives you that reassurance that yes, I'm confident that I've done the right things.
Who was with you on the ground, Mike?
So yeah, on the ground it was kind of different every day. So I drove myself from my house to the location. So we all drove separately. And there was a presenter, there was myself, there was a researcher and a production manager on location. So production manager was sort of looking after the talent, kind of being a runner basically, and the sort of researcher AP was kind of assisting me, writing notes, checking that we're sort of hitting the beats on the script. And then I was kind of, producing and filming the presenter. So which is hard actually, because when you're trying to hit because obviously the nature of these shows at the moment is that something's happening. It was a shoot that was based out of Manchester. The contributors were in London. So, I wasn't involved in pre-production. So I'm coming in cold to the production. So trying to get what they want in their head and then reading it from a script and trying to get the presenter to do it is hard, obviously, as we all know when we're self-shooting. So it was, the first day was a bit of a baptism of fire, I'd say, definitely. But, it's like, I kind of describe it too. It's like working on a new format. There's always going to be teething problems at the start. It's all new to us, and we don't really, we're all working together to work it out. And there's no finger pointing. It's just, I think as a PD, because you're at the coalface in the trenches, you're the one that's got to give that feedback. And if you don't, then nothing will change, and then production won't know. So, I gave my feedback, and they totally took it on board, and they were brilliant.
What was your kit? Was it in-house kit or?
It was in-house kit. So I made sure that I asked, what has all that kit been sanitized? When was the last time it got used? Especially because if we're using an FS7, that kit's gone through so many different hands, as you know. So yeah, it's just checking those kind of things. And it's more like, look, the guidelines are there and they're fine, but in the field, it's a whole different story. And look, we're all very sensible, and we're all we all know what's wrong and not right. But it's just making sure you've got those backstops in place for you, and making sure that, is there hand sanitizer there? Is there gloves if I need them? Has the kit been sanitized? All of those little things. It's just making sure that you feel confident going into there. Because if you feel comfortable, then it will make the shoot comfortable. But don't be afraid to ask if those. At the start, I was emailing, asking, "Oh, has the kit been sanitized?" I'm thinking, "Oh, I sound like an idiot," but actually, it's the new world we live in. So don't feel like you can't ask these silly questions, basically.
Mike, can I ask how? So you were with a small team. How familiar you were with the domestic backgrounds that everybody on your team was coming from, and whether there were discussions about the different anxiety levels and the different concerns of the different team members?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I wasn't really. I didn't know this team, so yeah, it's definitely a case. I mean, it was, it's like coming out of a mole burrow, and you come up and it's just like, oh my God, I'm back working. This is all very strange. But yeah, it's just being sensible. We go to Sainsbury's and people barge past you. No one was doing that. It's just being sensible and also looking after each other. It's like, no, don't touch that camera bag because I've just touched that. Do you want to put some gloves on, or do you want to wipe your hands before you do it? And it's just everyone looking after each other.
Realistically,
and it was fine.
Sorry, Mike. Realistically, how much time do you think you need to work into the sort of the beginning part of the day, which normally say you allow an hour to get somewhere and set up and all that stuff. How much longer do you think you realistically need now?
I think I allowed myself an hour and a half to set up. So I allowed an extra half an hour. And that was more like to get into the building, to get everything there, to set the kit up, just to make sure you're familiar, everything's wiped down. You kind of know where you're going to put your radio mic for the presenter to pick up. You kind of know where your spaces are. You just don't put yourself under pressure. More time, the better, really. But I think we were under quite a tight time frame on the first shoot, so I allowed an extra half an hour, which was fine. Which is fine, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is, it's scheduled and it's easy. When it's all filtered down from the channel, they've got big expectations. The show is ambitious, which is great and fine and exciting to work on. It's just, they've only got a limited budget to do a certain amount of talent days, and they were trying to cram a lot in, and we got it all done. But it would have been a lot for that first shoot. It would have been a lot easier on everybody if there maybe was one less thing to do. So you have that buffer time, because we didn't have any buffer time worked in, and it from experience, it needed someone experienced in there to be able to get the job done. But I think buffer time is crucial.
Would that have been slightly different, mate, if you were on the show for longer and could have been involved a bit more? So you could have.
Yeah. I think it could have been. Yeah, because you're kind of going in. You know what it's like doing dailies here and there. You are kind of you have to get up to speed very quickly. And we the day before I spoke to the exec, that you get that brief, but you're going in cold. You haven't worked with the presenter before. You haven't worked with your team members before. So it was a bit of a strange alien experience, and especially like most of us, we haven't worked for 8 weeks, so we're all going to be rusty. It's not just it's like riding a bike, someone says, but it's just when your brain hasn't been engaged in that way, it does take a little bit of time. But yeah, full credit to the production. It did get better, and they did listen to me, and I think you have to have that voice, and you have to you have to speak up.
And so obviously though, that was a fairly controlled environment. It was in one location and it was all fairly static, and you knew what was going to happen ish. But Hannah, obviously you were making like a full-on obstock in a hospital from day one. What I'm interested in is how realistic those sort of protocols of putting mics on and off, which we tend to do like all day, changing and getting close to people, just filming in a room full of people. What are the protocols there? Are you allowed to do that? Do you have to film from a door? Can you do that? All that kind of stuff. How did you find all that?
Yeah. So it was me and there were 6 crews of us. So it was 6 cameras across 2 hospitals. So generally, my biggest tip, well, biggest thing I learned very quickly was to always obviously carry a long lens. I found I was filming with that more than I thought I would be. But yeah, I mean, I think first of all, obviously it being a hospital medical environment, I think it was very unique in terms of, you know, we had access to PPE all the time, and we were surrounded by professionals who were obviously so hot on, you know, infection control and all the rest of it. And you know, as I'm sure there are many people who've worked on sort of medical programs, or, you know, programs where you have access to institutions like that, you know, you always take the lead, you know, of the lead clinician, for example, or, you know, whoever's there. So if, you know, there were times when, you know, we'd often take their lead if it was in a, you know, if we had to be further back, or, you know, we couldn't be in the room at all, obviously we'd take their lead on it. But yeah, generally, it sort of depended on the situation, but I mean, I was in A&E, so that was quite different. There are, you know, certain places in the hospital that are a bit more controlled than others, and where they are controlled, and it's appropriate for you to be in the room, it's, you know, okay to, it's okay to be, it's sort of fairly easy to be 2 meters apart, but obviously you still want to be getting those intimate shots and things. So that's when I sort of switched to the longer lens. Yeah, and A&E was quite challenging, just because it's such a fast-paced, dynamic environment. So that was quite difficult. But again, like, you know, you're surrounded by medical professionals who are all in PPE as well, like all obviously taking it all very seriously. So you can, and you sort of blend in with them, I suppose. And so you sort of do what they do. Obviously, you know, you don't go rushing in and start, you know, giving medical attention, but you know, you sort of, you know, take their lead in a lot of things. So I think it's as much about, you know, collaborating when you're in those spaces. In terms of, yeah, a few like practical things with mics, we were just super hot on like wiping them down, like every time we sort of passed them over, or we got them back. It was difficult at times. Like you know, obviously you had to like really clearly explain like how to put a mic on and things like that.
Was that actually realistic? Like, could you actually do that, or in the end was it just a case of like we've all done it on loads of stuff where you cut corners, but in order just to get the production done, were the times where you're having to just like, do you know what, we've just got to get this mic on this person? And I just think it's interesting from a sort of hearing about that from a
defo. So, yeah, of course. So on so to be honest, we used the boom a lot, so obviously that was our main sort of audio. We never put mics on patients, we always just did the boom. And actually when it came to mics, we didn't bother with like, you know, like really neatly tucked away. It was just like, can you just put it straight on there? So we didn't overcomplicate it, and I think that just comes with the territory. I think when you're you know making a documentary that's just so obviously about, you know, coronavirus, and, you know, bearing in mind all the social distancing, I don't think really the audience really mind. So yeah, we just did that, but we relied a lot on boom, to be honest with you. We only really used mics on, you know, clinicians where we could do it in a really controlled way. But otherwise it was, yeah, mainly sort of all audio. But yeah, I think, you know, it's tough when you're sort of like rushing around, like, and as well, like, you know, as soon as you pick up the camera, obviously you want to get the best shot possible. So that means going really in, but, you know, relying on your long lens just to help you do that whilst, you know, trying to, you know, remember to stay back is a really good way of doing that, I found.
I was just going to say, Ollie and Hannah, like, I had to, so it wasn't just controlled environment. We did film a scene in a park, to sort of make use of their daily exercise, where we took the presenter to film with the two, the fiance, the bride and groom, in a park. And actually for that, because less run and gun than your sort of stuff, Hannah, I mean, because I was filming on single camera, and it was even shooting with the long lens. You know, when they're standing 2 meters, to swing 2 meters is quite far. And, you know, obviously, you know, we all shoot single camera and we get our cutaways and wide shots, etc., and coverage. But, you know, to make that scene dynamic and to follow it where you would normally, if they were stood closely, you could follow it better. It was tricky, actually. It was really tricky. And actually, I think I did say, you know, if we did a scene like that again, definitely benefit from 2 cameras, because it would just speed up things, and actually it would make it probably safer by doing that. Yeah, just wanted to add that sort of point in about coverage on sort of a more sort of flavoured show.
Yeah.
Of course, as soon as you introduce another shooter in, it's another person on location. So something that presumably everybody who's trying to plan and manage shoots is considering is minimising footprint.
Yeah.
So
I think it should be a case by case basis, because you've got to decide what's more important. Is it important to have a researcher there, or is it important to have a second shooter? And I think that's one of the things that sort of when their productions are crewing, it's like, do I need a runner there, or can the coordinator go, or can the researcher do the runner's job, or whatever it is? It's like, what isn't the most important to make the content and the safety of the crew, paramount? It's just deciding. I think it is just deciding.
Have you been having any of those kind of thoughts, Rox, about sort of setting up shoots and getting going and stuff?
Yeah, I think kind of mirroring what Zoe was saying is that we do have to limit the amount of people that are on shoot, but also I agree that it's kind of who is the best. But if you do need to if it's safer to get the shots you want and you need 2 cameramen, but you reduce the amount of people, yes, that totally makes sense. But yeah, I think I would say from my perspective across my production is limiting the amount of people that are there, but also making sure the most useful people are there as well. And that's quite difficult depending on what every show is different. So it kind of depends on what you're making. Some of the interviews that I do, they can be done one-on-one at a distance. So in that respect, they're a lot easier to maintain. And some of them are a lot bigger. So it's kind of looking at different ways. I think you have to look at the shoot itself or the show itself and the best way to make that work, but then factoring in everybody's safety, the budget, all the other things that kind of come with it. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a toss-up between making sure we get the best quality show, but also for me the most important thing is also everybody's safety. That's kind of the way I come at it. I'm always trying to find a middle ground to make sure we get the best quality, but also everyone's safety is covered in so many ways, like with PPE, etc. So yeah,
I think a lot of people have got in touch, and I think one of the biggest worries is that crews are already pretty minimal. Often you're going out with 2 people, so making them smaller is easy. In fact, I saw someone sent me something earlier. True North have put out an ad saying they want. Have you seen this? They want.
Been tagged in it 4 times.
You have. They want people to apply who cohabit with other shooters. So, which obviously makes sense, but then there's already a list, sort of as long as my arm, of criteria needed to be a PD in the first place, and now you've also got to live with someone else who also shoots, and it just seems like it's so hard to crunch shoots any more than they already are. And I think people are worried that if you start doing that, then technically you're reducing the spread of coronavirus, but it's not particularly safe in other ways. People's mental health and long days, all that kind of stuff.
I think it's just being realistic about what the show is that you're going to shoot, isn't it? It all comes down from what's being commissioned and the production company's way that they think they're going to make it, because there's certain things you can't do now, and there's certain things that you can do, and it's sort of managing expectations about what can get done in what time, as kind of Mike said, and thinking around it, being creative, which is where all the development teams, I'm sure, are beavering away, hopefully, getting ready to send us out and film things. But, we're stuck in a situation that we can't do anything about, so we just have to find a way, think creatively about trying to make that work.
Yeah, and I'm interested because obviously you did something with crew, didn't you? And crew are obviously, always they're one for rules. They like rules. How was it like working with sort of a DOP on a sort of a isolation shoot?
Yeah, so I did Richard and Judy's book club, basically, the Keep Calm and Carry On, Keep Reading. I can't remember what it's called. Keep Reading and Carry On, or something like that.
It's great, mate. Really good.
Great. But totally different to both the other 2 shows. It was a very controlled environment. In fact, it was Rich and Judy's house. And I was in the garage 2 meters away from the exec or the series editor or the exec, you know, and he was 2 meters away as well. And we had 2 different monitors, which normally would all be crowded around one monitor. You know, normally when we got there in the morning, there was the crew. We could then have 2 camera guys inside, social distancing as well in the room with the doors closed. So Richard and Judy couldn't go in there until they'd finished setting things up. So they could only carry the kit. And at the beginning, I was thinking, oh, that's going to take ages, because normally we go in with you know, everyone turns up on set and everyone's moving furniture and building the new TV unit from Argos, and then, you know, doing all these things. And it's like, and you're thinking we're going to need everyone in there, but actually it worked really well because there was 2 people in there, much more space. They could take their time. They knew where all the kit was because it was basically sort of, you know, their kit, and it went quite smoothly in that regard. So it was brilliant having the crew, really, and the schedule was so realistic. It was a few months. I'm trying to think, it was about a month ago now, and I think we were still kind of. It felt a lot more restricted. I think we probably were a lot more restricted. Or one exercise a day kind of thing. So it felt like they were being even more careful than maybe we are now. Like we disinfected the room. There's a special aerosol disinfectant that you can put in a room, and it, you know, every single day it was left when we left for an hour just to disinfect the room. And the mics that Rich and Judy wore were prepped 3 days in advance, put in sealed packages so the virus would die, and then they had to put their own mics on. And that was an issue one day, and we were talking about that a moment ago. Judy's mic wouldn't go on her top properly, and it kept on spinning around, and the mic cable would show, and then it would rustle, and Richard was doing his best to sort of help. The exec was kind of wanting to carry on, and I kept on saying, hold on a minute, let's stop. And they're kind of, well, it is, you know, it doesn't matter. Everyone understands. And you're like, well, no, we're still making a TV show, and we want it to look good, and so let's just wait a minute, try. But, you know, I didn't even meet Judy because I was outside the whole time. I never went in the house once. Wow. I met Richard briefly because he popped out, you know, but he's masked on, and we're all gloves and masks and everything on location. So the show that we did was just scheduled really well. It kind of lent itself to the situation, and the fact that it was, you know, it's a half an hour show talking about books with some Zoom conversations that were on a TV. We weren't running around after people. We weren't grabbing, you know, I've done that plenty of times as well with my own kit, running around, you know, I need a different lens, I'm going to grab this, you leave something somewhere, you know, and I can just imagine that without, everything needs to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Would be my own thought.
Would agree with that, because I think, you know, the show that I was doing was ever evolving and changing, and it was quite fast paced. So I think it's hard to react quickly to things these days. You know, that's sort of the hardest thing to do. Editorially and to then film it, you know, and turning something around as well is hard.
Actually, sorry. No, the only last thing was Mike sort of mentioned the crew element of it. Really, was that they had to do more than they would normally do. You know, the DOP was wiping down books and putting them, you know, doing the set, and you know, what else, doing mic things, and the assistant camera or the other camera guy who was shooting was doing techie stuff for us on laptops, because there was just not the number of people there. You know, we didn't have a logger because there was no point. You log it afterwards. You know, it's just being realistic.
For me, that's a massive double-edged sword that we need to be conscious of when we're planning. Isn't it wonderful how flexible and adaptive and you know, knowledgeable and enthusiastic the people that work in our industry are? You know, you talk about a DOP wiping down a TV. You make productions in America when you're not even allowed to move a stand. You know, we operate in a very all hands on deck manner. But as Ollie said earlier, and as Roxanne hinted at, the combination of trying to limit the footprint, we can't be taking advantage of individuals' flexibility and adaptivity. You know, so that it's creating new hazards by mitigating COVID hazards. And from a planning point of view, this discussion today, and hopefully future discussions, and every time somebody reports back, as Mike was saying about the feedback loop, that is what takes this discussion from being hypothetical to something that we can tangibly reference and work with. So, I mean, if communication was important before in this industry, it's just gone through the roof now. We need to be listening when we're planning shoots to the real experiences of people like you guys who are trying to implement protocols and finding some more useful than others. I mean, I'm on a production. We have taken months now of the fact-finding process, the emphasis being on listening. We're still watching and refusing to put ourselves in a corner in terms of committing to exact shooting plans, because it seems like the advice changes every single day. We're trying to do it safely, we're trying to do it within budget, we're trying to manage the expectations of the commissioners and the broadcasters, and everybody is pulling together to make the thing happen. But there's a real danger of pushing different individuals too hard because you're asking more of them, I think. So,
yeah. And I think that is, on that sentiment, Zoe, it's down to us now to not be afraid to push back. You're not going to ruffle feathers by saying that you didn't feel safe. And I think the execs will be receptive to it and will appreciate it, because at the moment it seems like all the higher brass editorial team are working from their house, and we're out in the field, and they have no idea. So, we are the ones at the coalface, and we are the ones that are responsible for sort of feeding back. And I think, more than ever, don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're working for a decent, humane production, then it's in your senior's interests to look after individual welfare. It's intrinsically linked to the welfare of the production. So, absolutely, like talk to us. We need to know before we can help, or at least plan.
Yeah, I think on the show that I was doing, the sort of production side of things were the most cautious out of everybody, trying to make sure that everything's been ticked. You talked earlier about the background mic of people, and I know that it's confidential stuff, but we all had to fill out a form to talk about our whereabouts the last few weeks, or who we've been in contact with, what we've been doing, that kind of thing. So even though you might not know exactly, I'm sure, did you have to do something similar to that? There's a lot of extra forms for the thing that I did.
No, I didn't actually, but that is a very good thing to do. And
they were brilliant, but it's the same company that actually make the hospital, so I imagine that they've got the kind of a little bit more know-how maybe on the ground, and were brilliant.
I think that's a great thing to advocate, because on the guidelines it doesn't say anything about that, and I know from sort of listening to other sort of groups talking about going back to work, I think the worry is people are scared to go into supermarkets, let alone going back into shoots. So I think if you do have that informed knowledge before walking into something, I think that's great. It's really good. It
is really good, and it is in some of the guidance available. It's not in the packed document, but it's in the first option generic advice that's been issued. I think the thing to be conscious and cautious of there is that we're not putting the onus on the individual to say, I'm guaranteeing that I'm not a danger, because that's not fair. Nobody can. So it comes with that caveat. But otherwise, again, like talking about where you come, what's in the situation, what anxieties, that's surely part and parcel of making a production at this time.
What I think would be, sorry. What I was going to say, what I think would be really interesting going forward is, I know some of you touched on sort of mental well-being side of it, and I think what I've sort of been speaking to people a lot about, and like some of my friends who maybe are starting up, is having that worry of like exposing people or spreading it around and things like that. And I think particularly when I was in the hospital environment, it is it's quite intense. There's a lot of COVID, so it can be quite anxiety inducing. But I think what really helped me was sort of knowing that we had a real purpose in being there. And I think that's going to be really interesting going forward. It's like, how do productions and how do commissioners justify essentially making a program, or putting people essentially at risk, including members of the public, if you're using your general public as your contributors, how are they going to justify that, albeit measured risk? So I think it'd be really interesting going forward about that the messages from productions and reassurance that although practically all these safety things in place, you do have a by making this program, you've got a purpose of being there, and I think that will really help people on the ground sort of keep going and just keep that anxiety at bay that they're putting people at risk unnecessarily, I suppose.
I think that's really important, Hannah, and that's a brilliant example of, we've been brainstorming about the kind of anxieties that people might feel in those environments, and that hadn't occurred to me personally. That's not to say it hasn't occurred to better people, or but I think that's a really, really important thing, like validating why your crew is there, making them feel empowered that they are there for a reason. The risk is being managed as best as it possibly can. That's something that I'd be happy to incorporate into my planning, at least.
I think on the mental health side, it's actually getting back to work is a good saviour for that, because we've all been locked down, and as I said before in another Viva webinar, so much of your self-esteem is built into your work. So actually getting back on the tools was refreshing, and actually had the best night's sleep after my first day of work. So that's good, isn't it?
There's a few other things to get through just from a logistical point of view. So want to move on, but the first question, which had a question from Cara. How did you guys on the ground plan for things like toilet breaks and food and lunch and stuff like that? Was that a nightmare? How did it work?
Well, we had to take our own lunch with us. So we had to take our own food. We were lucky. We were in a house. There was a sort of an extra toilet that had been cornered off for production, and there was a strict protocol of gloves, wash your hands, wipe down, re-glove, leave, mask on, so there was like a list of things you had to do when you went to the toilet. So in my respect, it's probably slightly easier than maybe yours might, if you're out and about.
Well, we were in an office, so there was separate toilet. There was different toilets, so everybody just used different toilets, and they were quite big, large toilets, so it was fine. In terms of the food, I think we did Deliveroo, because it's kind of it's still they sort of abide by all the regulations, so that was kind of the safest way. So no one's kind of touching, not too many hands are touching your food, and then eating, socially distanced eating, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, in a hospital, it's again probably a different environment, but so we just used the toilets as the staff would, I suppose, and there was like an M&S in the hospital. So that's, I think for us, it was just it's like so when you go into the hospital, you're all prepared, and then when you come out of the hospital, that was a big thing. We changed all of our clothes as soon as we stepped in the house, showered straight in. So we tried to have as much separation between the hospital and home as possible.
And one of the other things we've had a few people ask about is I've heard lots of rumours flying around about like whole crews isolating together before starting shoots, or actually moving in with contributors and things like that. What do you all think about that? And is that, Zoe, is that something you guys have modelled at all?
Not necessarily from my sort of, I think, as I said, I'm lucky in the respect that most of the shoots I'm doing can be 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 maybe, with a contributor, but something I've definitely looked into. But then I think the issues you get with that is then you would probably have to, if you had a crew all staying together, that's something you'd have to budget for, accommodate, which is all well and good depending on the show that you have, but necessarily might not be factored in from the start. So then you then have to find that, and then that could have other factors on other areas of the show, because you're obviously it's good because it keeps everybody together in terms of isolating them, but then that's then taking away from another part of the show that you might want to finance. So it's kind of a bit of a toss-up, I'd say. And in terms of isolating with contributors, that has not come my way at all, and I hope it doesn't, because I think the problem with that is that you have to then look at everybody's you'd have to go through everyone's history as well, which obviously is confidential, but you still have to ensure that, I would say for a minimum of 2 weeks, maybe even more, that you have where everyone have been, who they've been in contact with. And I actually think I don't know, I kind of feel like there's bigger room for error and making it worse for people, I'd say, but that hasn't come my way.
It's like it could be possible, but you just have to plan. It'd be a really big logistical nightmare to plan ahead, because you'd almost have to isolate people for 2 weeks beforehand that you could control, and then put people together, and it could go on, couldn't it?
I don't think it's realistic. I think it's definitely something we've considered. We are looking at domestic environments, 1-on-1, 2-on-1, and partial studio shoot for our provisional setups. So obviously with the domestic environments, it is a contributor's house. So the discussion has been had, is there a world where we put somebody in with that contributor for a significant amount of time so that they can move as a unit together? And like Roxanne said, it's a logistical budgeting minefield that takes away from the rest of the shoot. And also on another facet, potentially prevents you from using best practice and from thinking in the right mind frame when you're interacting with the rest of the outside world. So it's not favourable. At the moment, no doors are closed in terms of ideas. Like it's whatever might work should be thought through, but it doesn't make a great deal of sense. Yeah. Also, I guess it then, if you're not doing that, it just generally limits the kind of productions that are even feasible to make, because of the interaction that you have to have. On top of that, like in the guidelines, it says obviously you're allowed to leave your house to go to work if you have to. So we'd be fine, but contributors, unless we were filming in their house, wouldn't be going to work, so they wouldn't be able to take part. And I guess that includes studio shows, does it? I don't know.
I mean, I think it's that fine line between whether you're paying a contributor or not, I think is ultimately an element in that discussion. So if your contributor is being remunerated and that makes it a contract, then that's going to be a different situation to something when they're not.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
I think. Oh God.
Very
no. It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I wouldn't have a clue.
I mean, who wants to live with a contributor?
Yeah, well, no, exactly.
Double pay, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
Double pay, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, casting and shooting. Yeah.
I was going to say the rate premiums are going to go through the roof.
Some of us endured the island, and that is 24 hours with control.
Good rates on that, though.
Yeah, I've heard it's good.
Yeah, I mean, just to mention on the rates, like the rates actually were pretty normal for the shoot that I did.
That's good.
Which is a good sign. They were fairly accommodating with the rates. So yeah, I'd take that as a positive, because there's been a lot of discussion about that. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask you for your normal rate, which you deserve, especially shooting in these sort of times.
Yeah. With things like travel, it seems like a lot of what everyone's talking about are sort of 1 or 2 man or women shoots. So, and in terms of sort of getting to a shoot, I've had a question about the logistics involved in that. So say it was a PD and a runner team going somewhere to shoot something. Is that a 1 car situation? And in which case, how do you get around the social distancing? Is it 1 car and a train? In which case, what's the impact on the schedules if you're doing like multiple locations and things like that? How does that all actually work realistically?
So we so basically on the it was kind of different on some of the shoots, but we did do a little bit of moving around, and it was 2 individual Addison leaves for the people that didn't have cars, and then I drove with all the kit. So yeah, definitely not sharing any cars. It was all sort of taxis or personal vehicles, and the presenter travelled in his own car as well. So yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing a car. I don't think you can really, you can't really social distance in a car, other than an Aston Lee, which is big enough to do that.
Yeah.
I will mention on hospital. So my AP and I, we were put up in a flat together. So we went to and from the hospital in taxis together as well. But I think because we were together all the time and weren't, obviously going off in a row, I think that was fine. So yeah, that's what we did.
Were you isolated together before for a period of time before starting then?
No, so we just went. No, we weren't. But then we sort of stayed together. I think, but I know before we started, we'd had like a series of questions about had we had any symptoms, or had we been to different countries and all that sort of stuff. So I think they were sort of I guess mitigating the risk of how much we would have it before we even started. And then obviously we had the 2 weeks of isolation afterwards as well. So it's quite a long time. But in that time, I think just because it was the two of us living together all the time, we got the taxi. I don't know what it worked out budget-wise, whether that was a better way to do it or not. I don't know. But that was okay in that circumstance.
I was talking to one of our Viva members earlier who was telling me about a production they've been working on. And they were working in teams of 4 all over the country, but they were sharing cars. So they had 2 people per car. And they were driving around and they were staying in hotels. So obviously, are hotels, I don't know, are hotels even open? Is anyone staying in hotels?
Yeah, I think 20% aren't they? Yeah.
Some of them are, but I think, well, from my perspective, I'm steering clear, not just because I feel like, if I haven't got any other option, but luckily I do. But I would prefer, if I had to overnight my team anyway, I prefer to put them in either like a serviced apartment or even an Airbnb that I know that I could get properly cleaned before they went into it. And that's something that I'm having to look at every time I move my staff around, just because I think hotels are okay, but I think a lot of them have mostly been shut up until quite recently. And then I think you just need, from a production side, you need reassurance that they've been properly cleaned before your staff go in there. Well, for my reassurance anyway. So that's something that, unless I can know that that's happened, I wouldn't be putting my staff in hotels.
Interestingly, the industry guidance is suggesting hotels over Airbnbs for the flip side reason, which is that it's an unregulated industry. So I think unless your production manager is happy to perform additional cleaning before a team coming into an Airbnb, then hotels that have COVID practices in place and that are open are at least in terms of the guidelines available at the moment preferable.
The reason I'm doing it though is because I'm dealing with America, and that's a very different kettle of fish right now. So, but yes, I get what you're saying, but UK fine, America not so much.
Well, I was interested by this aerosol disinfectant thing. I think it was First Option that might have suggested. I don't know how good or what but that sounds like a great little thing to have.
Fogging.
Fog. Yeah.
And I haven't used it, but I have been advised that it's for larger spaces. So it's been included in the guidelines principally for higher end film and drama and high end TV. Separate discussion. But we were told not necessary for smaller environments, but I don't know, like if it's something that could help, then it's certainly something that should be.
I don't know if they're different versions. This was like a small aerosol can, like a deodorant type size, and
Well, if it worked for Richard and Judy,
it made Judy's voice a bit sore. That was one thing they noticed. It dried the air or something, but I don't know if that's official.
Quick question coming from Hannah Wilkinson. Hannah, were you paid for your period of self-isolation at the end, your 2 weeks of self-isolation?
Yes, we were. And I think that's really I think it should be that way because yeah, it's like basically we did the job and then we had, obviously had self-isolate for 2 weeks, meaning we couldn't take other work. So I think it'd be pretty harsh of a production company not to pay you for those 2 weeks, considering you can't take other work. So yes, we were, and I think that's a good thing.
And do you think that will that be the same for people sort of coming back from any filming that does ever get going abroad, if we have to quarantine when we get back, or just finishing off shoots in general? Do you guys see that as something that will be happening, being paid for isolating base, whether before or after?
Roxanne, are your crews US based?
They are at the moment, but it's all still kind of starting up, so we're still looking into it, to be honest. So yes, right now, but not confirmed.
I think America is just another kettle of fish, Ollie.
I know. I'm having a lot of fun right now with America.
Excited to hear about that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably why I come at it as a different, because I do a lot of US channel shows, so that's kind of like a lot of the stuff that I work on. But sorry, going back to your question, Ollie, was it about isolating crews?
Isolating crews before and after, and if the production requires that, is it something that they'll be paying?
I think if it's a production requirement, then I would say yes, but it obviously depends on every single production company, budget, and also I think the thing to remember now is that COVID is a known risk, where before, even though we all kind of knew it was coming, I think it's now specifically everyone knows it's there, and it's I don't know, like you think about other things that you could contract on the way to work. Even in a normal situation, I think sometimes you have to factor that in. So I think it does depend on the production company themselves. I would like to say yes, but I think I think that's, as I think we were saying before, I think it has to be a line of communication. And if you're unsure, then ask those questions. Like, the way I like to operate is that I would like to think that my staff could ask me anything and that I could be as supportive as I could. And so I do feel like anything that you're unsure about, before you even take the job, have those conversations so you're fully up to speed. And they're kind of the chats that I'm already having with people that I'm considering engaging. Just because I think it's important that everyone's as crystal clear as they can be, because this is so unknown to everybody, and there's so many kind of pitfalls and things happening and stuff that production and execs might not even think about, because I'm not on the ground. So it does depend.
I think it's for anyone that's going to go and do a shoot next week or in the coming weeks. Don't be too worried that you've got all these things to think about: regulations, rules, guidelines. Do I? Don't I? Do I? It's just, you're not going to get it all in one go. Like I didn't. You just have to use your common sense, like we have all been doing anyway, and not get too wrapped up in it, because it will inevitably affect your output. So I think it's just using your common sense, and as Roxanne said, asking those silly questions to people that have been studying these guidelines and been working with these guidelines for a little longer. No question stupid at the moment. I just think, because you can't be expected to go into your first shoot and know everything and work with those practices. It's impossible. So, I was asking silly questions at the start, and it helped me to the final shoot, which ran really smoothly, was perfect. But you get back up to speed pretty quickly, but it's just, you just have to go through the motions.
I think it's also important to remember that as someone who is looking at constant daily changing guidelines, etc., we don't have all the answers either. So because it is changing so much, I don't think there are any silly questions, because sometimes I'll be like, you know what, I hadn't thought of that. And it's because, as we've said, this is so new to a lot of people, that sometimes there's just going to be things that I might not have thought of, and I would rather that someone said that to me. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't thought of that. I really need to look into that further and get some answers from my staff.
Mobilize your self-interest.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be as aware of or think through as thoroughly the risks that you might face as you. Like, nobody hypothetically can do that for every single person. So this needs to be an environment, like Roxanne said, where people think, okay, well, you know, am I going to, when I do this, am I going to have to do that? And then bring that to a discussion.
I think what was really good for the show that I did was, and I imagine it's quite a useful thing at the moment, is to have someone on set or near you that is constantly thinking about you as well, and whether that's the 2 meter rule or whether that's what you're picking up or not, because you know what it's like when you pick a camera up and run around. And you know, the biggest example I was thinking is if you're filming by the side of a road, and you know, most risk assessments will be, well, okay, you're going to wear high vis and you're going to have someone watching your back pretty much because you've got your head in your camera and you're not going to be noticing. It's the same sort of thing, but it's to do with the precautions you have to take for this. So it's actually really handy to have someone, like we had the PM on site, and she would constantly be saying, oh, have you changed your gloves? Do you need a new mask? Have you touched that? Have you washed your hands? You know, and it just was a constant reminder, because you are up against time pressure, aren't you? So it's, and I suppose that health and safety thing is going to be massive at the moment. The first option I hear are on pretty much everything. And a friend of mine who's also a kind of medic and a safety advisor, he's working today on a show, which I don't think he'd normally work on, but people are being employed to kind of keep an eye on crews and watch out. So
yeah, it feels like you kind of need a dedicated sort of COVID person who's just going to enable everybody else to just do their jobs, and their sole job is making sure that everyone is sticking to the stuff. So if you can kind of, then you're able to forget about it and you can crack on, and they can step in and say get back or whatever. But then that's another person, isn't it?
And then I also think as well, like I think it is down to like different people's, you know, anxieties. Like as long as like we're not putting people at risk, obviously, by our actions when we're on shoots, and contributors especially. And I think, you know, me and my AP, for example, we were always checking in with each other, making sure we were okay, and also that we were comfortable with how we were doing things. It's like, oh, okay, are you happy that when I come out, I'm going to do this and you're going to do the boom, you're going to wipe down the boom? And we were always checking in with each other. And I think we were always talking about how, like, in a weird way, you know, you're just as likely to get it at Tesco as you are on a shoot, even if you're not doing all the things. So I think there is also something in there in, you know, listening to other people's levels of anxiety and taking that into consideration as well. Like, obviously, as long as you're taking the precautions seriously, I think people will have different expectations and different understand, you know, it will mean something different to everyone, I suppose. And so it might just also be about communicating with your team very regularly.
I think it's about doing that, you know, dynamic risk assessment in your head all the time, because inevitably shoots always adapt and evolve and change, and you might have to run outside, you might have to do this, and I think more than ever, you know, it's what you need to think about first before you shout action. Yeah, I just think it's just working in a different way, which takes time, but you will get there.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing as a director. The longer you have to think about the thing that you're going to be working on, the more you can think about ways to sort of make it work for you, the way you have to film it, you know, and whatever show you're making, whatever it is, whatever content. You know, the show that I was doing, I literally came on board, I think about 2 days before, just as the recce was happening, but the recce was happening with a DOP on his own, masked up. Yeah. But we were thinking about, right, and I was thinking, well, if we can get these shots, we can do this, and we can film it this way. And again, I was just thinking more, just literally cameras probably. But if you're on the ground running around filming things, then the more time you have beforehand to think it through and go, do you know what, that location is not going to work. Let's go to this one because this will be better for us because it's got a big car park, or it's in the middle of nowhere, or I don't know, just a bit. Everyone's opinion is so good, but I think at the moment it's more vital to have a kind of, especially a director who's going to go out and be filming it, involved early on.
Arguably, the prep time, an extra week prep for a director could save you a lot of time and an extra person on the ground for the whole shoot. If they've just thought through a little bit more, like you say, like, is that location actually going to be all right? Or should we look for another one? That extra week might save you a lot of time and money, I guess. But then, I mean, it's always true, isn't it? Yeah,
I think the value of a recce would have helped me initially, because, you know, you're going to spaces you're not too familiar with on the day, and then you've got to set up. And I think, as Ant said, like having that foresight to think beforehand is better than, you know, more than ever is crucial.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Has anyone got anything burning that they'd love to say before we wrap this up? No. Very good. Okay, well, that is that. Thanks very much, everyone. Really appreciate you all giving us the time. Thanks for everyone who watched. This will also be put up on Facebook. I'll cut it down and put it up on Facebook so you can all have a little watch. But thanks very much. See you all later.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.